I came home early to surprise my daughter on her birthday. Instead, I found her unconscious on the living room floor. Her husband was sitting 5 feet away, feet up, watching TV. He looked over and shrugged. She's always being dramatic. Probably tripped over her own feet. My hands were shaking as I called 911. 7 minutes later, the lead paramedic walked in, took one look at my son-in-law, and went completely pale. He pulled me aside and whispered, "Sir, before anyone else in this room hears this, there are things about tonight you need to know. Welcome to Dad's Revenge Stories. I'm incredibly grateful to have you here, to help us grow. Please comment below with your city or country. I'd love to know where you are watching from. Also note that this narrative includes fictional elements for entertainment and education. Any resemblance to actual names or settings is coincidental, but the message I'm conveying to you is useful. My name is Roy Callahan. I am 62 years old, and I have spent 35 of those years behind the wheel of a freight truck. Long haul. Cross country. The kind of driving that most people cannot imagine doing for a week, let alone for 3.5 decades. I own Callahan Freight, LLC, out of Burbank, California. That is a formal way of saying I am the man who still does most of the driving, himself hauling industrial equipment and commercial goods between Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Las Vegas, and everywhere the road takes me in between. People who have never driven long haul do not understand what it does to a person. It does not just teach you roads, it teaches you to read everything around you. The way a load shifts tells you something is wrong before any gauge does. The way a bridge vibrates under your tires tells you whether the concrete underneath is solid or crumbling. After 35 years, that ability does not stay in the cab. It follows you home. It sits with you at the kitchen table. It watches the room when you walk into a place. My wife Carol passed 4 years ago. Breast cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the morning I sat beside her bed and held her hand while the monitors went quiet. I will not spend more words on that than necessary because Carol would not have wanted me to. She was practical that way. She always said grief was like a long stretch of bad highway. You drive through it. You do not park in it. After Carol, I had one thing left that mattered more than the road. My daughter, Diana. 34 years old, with her mother's eyes and a laugh that could fill a truck stop diner. She had been married to Travis Holt for 2 years, and they lived in the house on Clearwater Avenue in Burbank, where Diana had grown up, the house Carol and I had bought in 1991 for less than it cost to park a rig in downtown Los Angeles today. Tonight was Diana's birthday. September the 9th, 2025. I had been running a delivery route out of Las Vegas, scheduled to return in 2 days. But the receiving dock at the Phoenix Distribution Center had cleared faster than anyone had planned, and by early afternoon I had signed off on the manifest and was standing beside my truck in the Nevada heat with 36 hours of open road and a decision to make. I made it in about 4 seconds. I pulled off the interstate at a small shopping strip outside of Barstow, California, where a jewelry store sat between a sandwich place and a nail salon. I had passed that strip 100 times without stopping. This time I stopped. In the window of that jewelry store was a pair of earrings, blue pearl drops on small gold hooks. I stood on the sidewalk in the afternoon heat and looked at them, and I thought about last spring when Diana and I had walked past a shop window in Santa Monica, and she had stopped for just a moment, looked at a pair almost exactly like these, and said quietly, almost to herself, "Those are pretty." Then she kept walking, because Diana never asked for things outright. She was Carol's daughter all the way through. I went inside and bought them. I was back on the I-15 heading south by 4 in the afternoon. I had not called ahead. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to see Diana's face when she opened the door, and found her father standing there 2 days early holding a small gift bag and feeling for the first time in longer than I could name like I was doing something exactly right. I turned onto Clearwater Avenue at 11:23 in the evening. The neighborhood was quiet. The kind of quiet that residential streets in Burbank get late on weeknights, porch lights on sprinklers set to go off at midnight, the distant pulse of the 134 freeway, a low hum somewhere to the south. I pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and sat for just a moment with the gift bag on the passenger seat. The front light was on. That was normal. Diana always kept the front light on. I unlocked the door with my key and pushed it open, and every single thing I expected about that night vanished in the space of one breath. Diana was on the floor, not sitting, not resting. On the floor, flat on her back in the center of the living room, arms at her sides, her head turned slightly to the left. Her purse had spilled open near the coffee table, its contents scattered across the carpet. A glass of water sat on the end table, half full, room temperature by the look of it. Her chest moved up and then down in a rhythm that was too slow and too shallow to be natural sleep. "Diana!" My voice came out louder than I intended, cracking at the edges, in a way I had not heard from myself in years. I crossed the room in 4 steps and dropped to my knees beside her, pressing 2 fingers to the side of her neck. Her pulse was there. Slow, too slow. "Diana, can you hear me? Open your eyes, sweetheart. Come on, open your eyes for me." She did not move. That was when I became aware of the television. I turned my head. Travis Holt. My son-in-law was sitting in the armchair on the far side of the room. He had his feet up on the ottoman. The television was tuned to ESPN, some late-night sports recap, the volume low enough to be background noise. He was holding a can of beer loosely in his right hand, and his expression, when he finally looked over at me, was the expression of a man who had been mildly inconvenienced, rather than a man whose wife was unconscious on the floor, 6 feet away from him. "She's fine," Travis said. He took a slow sip from the can. "She's always being dramatic. Probably tripped over her own feet." The heat that moved through my chest in that moment was not anger. Not yet. It was something older and colder than anger, the kind of feeling that comes when something you trusted completely shows you without any warning that it was never what you thought it was. "You didn't call 911, I said. My voice was flat, controlled. The voice I use when a load shifts at 60 miles per hour, and I have approximately 2 seconds to decide what to do about it. Travis shrugged one shoulder. I was getting around to it. I was already dialing. 911, what is your emergency? My daughter is unconscious on the living room floor. I said, forcing each word out at a measured pace while every nerve in my body was screaming. She is breathing but will not respond. I need an ambulance immediately. The address is 4471 Clearwater Avenue, Burbank, California. The dispatcher walked me through the next 7 minutes. Stay on the line. Do not move her. Monitor her breathing. Unlock the front door. I followed every instruction with one hand resting on Diana's wrist and one eye on the clock above the fireplace, counting seconds, because counting was the only thing keeping the cold rage in my chest from becoming something I could not take back. Travis set his beer can down on the end table. He looked at the television. Then he looked at Diana on the floor. Then he looked at me. His face had arranged itself into something that resembled concern, the way a man arranges furniture in a room he is trying to sell. That expression lodged itself somewhere in the back of my mind and stayed there. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. I heard the siren before I saw the lights. The first paramedic through the door moved the way certain men move when they have responded to enough emergencies that urgency no longer shows on their face. It lives in their hands instead. In the way they cross a room. in the precise economy of every step. His badge read, Marco Reyes, Team Lead, Burbank Fire Department, Emergency Medical Services. He was somewhere in his early 40s, broad across the shoulders, dark hair threaded with gray at the temples. He came through the front door I had left unlocked and did something in the first 3 seconds that I noticed even through everything else happening in that room. He read it. His eyes moved from Diana on the floor to the spilled purse near the coffee table to the half-full glass of water on the end table to me, kneeling beside my daughter, with 2 fingers still pressed to her wrist. Then his gaze traveled to Travis, standing now near the armchair, arms crossed loosely over his chest, wearing the expression of a man who had decided the appropriate response to this situation was to look appropriately worried without actually being so. Marco's eyes stopped on Travis for 1 beat longer than a professional assessment required. Then he was on his knees beside Diana, his hands already working. Sir, can you tell me how long she's been unresponsive? He directed the question at me without looking up. I found her like this when I came in, I said. Maybe 10-12 minutes ago. I don't know how long before that. The second paramedic, a younger woman with her hair pulled back tight, was already opening equipment bags. A third moved the coffee table back to give them room. Travis stepped forward. His voice shifted into something warmer, more measured the way a thermostat adjusts to a new setting. She has a history of low blood pressure, he said. Her doctor has been managing it for about a year. She probably just overdid it today. It's her birthday, so we had a few people over earlier, and she was on her feet most of the afternoon. Marco nodded. His hands did not pause. Has she taken any medications today that you're aware of? Marco asked. Just her usual supplements, Travis said. She takes them every night before bed. I make sure of it. Something about the way he said that last sentence moved through me like a cold current. Not the words themselves, the ease of them. I make sure of it. Not she takes them. I make sure of it. The difference between those 2 things sat in my chest like a splinter I could not locate precisely enough to pull out. Any alcohol this evening? Marco asked. A glass of wine at dinner, Travis said. Maybe 2. Nothing unusual. Marco looked up from Diana for the first time. He looked at Travis directly, and I watched Travis meet that look with the steady, open expression of a man who had nothing to hide and knew it. The expression held. It did not flicker. Marco looked back down at Diana. His team worked for 4 minutes with the focused quiet of people who have done this so many times that words between them are largely unnecessary. Diana was lifted onto the gurney with practiced efficiency. An oxygen mask was placed over her face. An IV line went into her left hand. The young paramedic called out numbers in a low voice. The other one responded. Marco listened and kept his eyes moving between the equipment readings and Diana's face. I picked up the small gift bag from where it had fallen near the couch when I dropped it. The blue pearl earrings were still inside. I had not put them down once. They were moving the gurney toward the door when Marco stopped. He turned around and looked at me. Not at Travis. At me. Mr. Callahan. His voice dropped to a register that did not carry past the 2 of us. Could I speak with you for just a moment before we go in the kitchen, if you don't mind? Travis took half a step forward. I can come too if it would help. Thank you, Marco said, and his tone was professionally courteous in a way that communicated very clearly that the answer was no. We'll just be a moment. The kitchen smelled like the cake Diana must have baked earlier. Chocolate with something warm underneath it, vanilla. Maybe the kind of smell that belongs to birthdays and ordinary Saturdays and every version of this house that did not include tonight. Marco pulled the kitchen door most of the way closed behind us. He did not reach for his radio. He did not open his notepad. He looked at me the way a man looks at another man when he is about to say something he has been carrying for longer than tonight. "Mr. Callahan, how long have you been away on this trip?" 6 days, I said. "Left last Wednesday morning." Marco drew one slow breath through his nose. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that?" The hairs on the back of my neck rose before he said another word. "Go ahead," I said. "This address has been called 4 times in the past 11 months, Marco said. "Tonight is the 4th call." He kept his voice level and professional, but underneath it, I could hear the particular weight of a man who had been carrying something too long and had finally found the right person to hand it to. "Each time your daughter was found unresponsive. Each time your son-in-law was present. Each time he provided detailed, medically fluent explanations that accounted for everything we observed. The floor did not fall out from under me. It tilted the way a truck tilts when a load shifts on a mountain. Grade everything moving at once, and the only choice available being whether to hold the wheel or let go of it." 3 times, I said. "Yes, sir." Marco paused. "The first call was in October of last year, the second in January, the third in May." He held my eyes without looking away. "Every single time we were told you were on the road and unreachable. Every single time we were told that contacting you would cause unnecessary stress." I felt my jaw tighten until the muscle along the side of my face began to ache. "I was never contacted," I said. "Not once." "No, sir," Marco said. "You were not." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. He held it toward me carefully, the way you hand something to a person you are not sure can hold it without it breaking them. "Mr. Callahan," he said quietly, "there is something else. Something about the man in that living room that you need to know before anyone else in that house does." Marco reached into the breast pocket of his uniform jacket and produced a folded sheet of paper. He held it out toward me with both hands, the way you hand something to a person when you want them to understand that what they are about to receive deserves to be held carefully. I took it. It was a printed incident report, the kind EMS teams file after every call. The address at the top was 4471 Clearwater Avenue, Burbank, California. The date on it was May 14th, 2025, 4 months ago. I had been running a Phoenix delivery that week, 5 nights away from home. "That is a copy of the report I filed after the 3rd call," Marco said. "I want you to see it in your hands before I tell you the rest." I looked at the paper. Then I looked up at him. "Tell me," I said. Marco pulled out the chair at the kitchen table and sat down across from me, which told me this was going to take longer than a standing conversation. I sat. The chair scraped against the tile floor, and somewhere in the living room I could hear Travis moving around the soft creak of the floorboards under his feet. "The first call to this address came in October of last year," Marco said. He spoke carefully, the way a man speaks when he has rehearsed something important and wants to get it exactly right. "Diana was found unresponsive on the bedroom floor. Travis told us she had a history of low blood pressure and had likely fainted. He knew the medical terminology. He cited her physician by name. He described her medications accurately and in detail. It all sounded completely reasonable." "Go on," I said. "The second call was January of this year. Same presentation. Diana on the floor unresponsive. Travis on scene calm, articulate, medically fluent. He mentioned a possible interaction between her blood pressure medication and a supplement she had recently started. Again, he had the right words in the right order. The kind of specificity that takes either medical training or very deliberate preparation." I pressed my hands flat against the tabletop. The wood was cool under my palms. Third call was May. That time the blood work came back with elevated levels that did not match his explanation. The numbers were higher than the previous visits, high enough that I filed a report with Adult Protective Services. Marco paused. Under California law specifically, the Welfare and Institutions Code Section 15,630, any emergency medical responder who has reasonable suspicion that a dependent adult is being harmed or neglected is required by law to report it to Adult Protective Services. I filed that report the night of the third call, but as of tonight, no formal investigation had been opened yet. 3 calls, I said. My voice came out rough ground down at the edges, and nobody told me. No, sir. Each time Travis told us you were on a long haul and that interrupting you would cause unnecessary stress to both of you. He was calm. He was cooperative. He had answers for every question before we finished asking it. Marco looked at me steadily across the table. A worried husband stumbles over those answers. He searches for them. Travis produced them the way someone reads from a document they have already memorized. The kitchen felt smaller than it had a minute ago. I could still smell the birthday cake Diana had baked, chocolate and vanilla, and the ordinary warmth of a day that was supposed to have been a good one. I breathed through my nose and kept my hands flat on the table. You said there was something else, I said. About the man in that living room. Marco reached up and touched his own left wrist, just below the cuff of his jacket sleeve. The gesture was deliberate. 8 years ago, he said, I was working a call in Riverside County. A woman 61 years old, widowed, living alone. She had been found at the bottom of her staircase with 2 broken ribs and a fractured wrist. The man present at the scene gave his name as Travis Holloway. He said she had fallen. He was calm. He was cooperative. He had answers for every question. Marco's jaw tightened for just a moment. The woman eventually withdrew her statement. The case was closed without charges. I stared at him. You're telling me Travis Holloway and Travis Holt are the same man. I am telling you that the man in your living room has a tattoo on his left inner wrist, Marco said. 3 small stars in a diagonal line. I noticed it the night of the third call in May, and it stayed with me. I ran it against my memory for 4 months before I was certain enough to say it out loud. He held my gaze without flinching. Tonight, when I walked through your front door and saw him standing there, I looked at that wrist again. The tattoo is identical, I am certain. The heat that moved through my chest was not the cold, controlled thing it had been an hour ago. This was something older and heavier than that. This was the specific weight of understanding that something terrible had been happening inside your own house to your own daughter for longer than you knew, and that you had been driving highways in 3 different states while it happened. I pressed the heels of my palms against the edge of the table until the wood bit into my skin. I made myself breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the breath I use when a tire blows at 65 miles per hour, and I have 2 seconds to decide between a controlled stop and a catastrophe. That breath has saved my life 4 times on the road. It saved me from myself in that kitchen. Why are you telling me this now? My voice came out level. I was working hard to keep it that way. Because the dosage tonight is the highest we have seen, Marco said. He did not look away from me. And because when you walked through that front door, I watched his face. He was not afraid, Mr. Callahan. He was not panicked. Marco let the words settle between us like something with weight. In 11 years of emergency response, I have learned to tell the difference between a person who is scared and a person who is performing. Tonight, that man was performing. From the living room came the sound of Travis setting something down on the coffee table. A glass, maybe. Ordinary. Domestic. the sound of a man completely at ease in a house where his wife had just been carried out on a gurney. I stood up from the table. My legs were steadier than I expected them to be. "My daughter needs me," I said. "She does, huh?" Marco said. He stood as well. "Go." I walked out of that kitchen carrying the gift bag in one hand and the incident report in the other, and I did not look at Travis Holt once as I crossed the living room and walked out the front door into the night. The ambulance moved fast through the empty streets of Burbank, and I sat on the narrow bench beside the gurney and held on with both hands and tried to remember how to breathe like a man who was not coming apart at the seams. Diana lay under a white sheet with an oxygen mask covering the lower half of her face and an IV line running into the back of her left hand. A young paramedic named Garrett sat across from me monitoring the equipment with the quiet efficiency of someone trained to look at numbers rather than faces in moments like this one. The overhead light inside the ambulance was harsh and white and gave everything the quality of something happening in a place removed from ordinary time. I looked at my daughter. I have driven through ice storms on the I-40 in New Mexico, through flash flood warnings on the I-10 east of El Paso, through the kind of white-knuckle crosswind on the Cajon Pass that makes a 40-foot trailer feel like a paper bag in a hurricane. There have been moments on the road when I understood very clearly that I might not make it to the other side of the next 10 seconds. In all of those moments, I held the wheel and I kept driving because that was the only available choice. Looking at Diana on that gurney was worse than any of them. She looked so small. That thought kept arriving in waves I could not brace against. This woman who had filled every room she walked into since she was 3 years old, who argued back at movie characters as though they could hear her, who called me every Sunday morning, without exception, to ask what I had eaten for breakfast, and then tell me I was eating wrong. She looked so small under that white sheet with the oxygen mask on her face and the machine beside her, tracking the slow, uneven rhythm of her heart. I reached out and put my hand over hers. Her fingers were cool. Not cold, but cool in the way that told me her body was working hard at something that I could not see. "Hold on, sweetheart," I said low and close. "I am right here. You hear me? I am not going anywhere." She did not respond. The machine kept its count. I thought about the birthday cake smell in the kitchen. I thought about the gift bag still in my left hand, the blue pearl earrings wrapped in tissue paper inside it. I thought about Diana at 8 years old, standing in the driveway, watching me pull out for my first long haul after her mother and I bought the house on Clearwater Avenue, and the way she had called after me, her voice carrying down the whole block. "Dad, don't forget to call when you get there." I had called her from every state line for 26 years after that. Not because she asked, because she had made me understand in 8 words delivered by an 8-year-old standing in a driveway in Burbank that the call was not for me. It was for her. I had called from every state line for 26 years, and I had never once thought to ask the right questions when I was home. We arrived at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center at 12 minutes past midnight. Diana was taken through the automatic doors and into the organized urgency of the emergency department. I gave her name, her date of birth, our insurance information to an admissions clerk who typed without looking up. Then a nurse walked me to a waiting area and told me a physician would be with me shortly. I sat down in a plastic chair the color of old concrete and looked at the gift bag in my lap. The fluorescent lights overhead had no interest in being kind to anyone sitting beneath them. A television mounted high in the corner cycled through cable news with the volume off. A vending machine in the hallway produced a low, persistent hum that was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. I opened my phone. I stared at it. I did not know who to call. There was no one to call. Diana was the person I called. 24 minutes later, a doctor in green scrubs came through the double doors at the far end of the hall. She was in her early 40s, short, dark hair, the focused, no-nonsense presence of someone who had practiced emergency medicine long enough to keep her expression controlled under pressure. But as she walked toward me, I saw it anyway. The tightness at the corners of her eyes, the careful set of her jaw that told me she had already decided how to begin a conversation she did not particularly want to have. Her badge read, Dr. Sandra Hale, Emergency Medicine, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She stopped in front of me and did not offer her hand. Mr. Callahan? Yes. I would like to speak with you privately, she said. There are some initial panel results I need to go over with you. She did not smile when she said it. She did not say Diana was going to be fine. She did not sound anything reassuring at all, which told me more than any reassurance could have. The private room Dr. Hale used was barely large enough for 2 chairs and a small table. There was a box of tissues positioned in the center of that table, and I noticed it the moment I sat down. In my experience, rooms where doctors pre-position tissue boxes are not rooms where they come in to tell you that everything is going to be all right. She sat across from me and spoke without softening her words unnecessarily. Diana was being stabilized. Her vitals were improving from where they had been when we arrived. The initial blood panel had flagged several items that required a full toxicology screen, a comprehensive test, to identify exactly what substances were present in her system, at what concentrations, and in what combinations. Results would take 2 to 3 hours. Is she going to be all right? I asked. Dr. Hale looked at me with the steady, careful eyes of a woman who had answered that question in this room more times than she could count. Her vitals are improving, she said. We are managing her condition actively. I will have a significantly clearer picture for you once the full panel is complete. A doctor who can tell you the person you love is going to be fine says so in the first sentence. Dr. Hale had not said it in the first sentence. She had not said it at all. I thanked her. I walked back out to the waiting area and sat down in that plastic chair and put the gift bag on the seat beside me and looked at the ceiling and breathed. The vending machine hummed. The television ran its silent news. Somewhere behind those double doors, my daughter was on a table with machines speaking for her. And I pulled out my phone and opened the family insurance portal because 35 years of hauling freight had taught me one thing above everything else. Every load tells a story. If you know how to read the numbers, they will tell you exactly what happened and when and who was responsible. I had never applied that skill to anything other than freight manifests before. I started applying it that night. The thing about reading numbers late at night in a silent room is that after a certain point, they stop being abstract. They become physical. Each one lands somewhere in your chest, and they accumulate the way water accumulates in a low spot on the road. Slowly at first, then all at once. I had spent 35 years reading freight manifests. Weight distribution, origin points, delivery windows, routing logic. A manifest will tell you everything that happened on a shipment if you know what sequence to read it in. You do not start at the beginning. You start at the anomaly. You find the number that does not belong, and you work outward from there until the whole picture assembles itself. Diana's insurance file went back 3 years. Most of it was exactly what careful living looked like. Annual checkups with her longtime primary care doctor on Victory Boulevard, a dental cleaning in March, a follow-up after a mild respiratory infection the previous winter. Normal, steady, the kind of record that makes sense when you know the person it belongs to. And then 14 months ago, something appeared that did not make sense. A prescription entry from a clinic I had never seen on any document in 34 years of being Diana's father. Route 118 Family Care Clinic, Chatsworth, California. The prescribing physician was listed as Dr. Felix Drummond. I had never heard that name once. I read the entry twice. Then I scrolled down. There was another one from the same clinic, same physician. then another. I stopped scrolling and started counting the way I count inventory when I suspect something is off, and I need the exact number before I say a word. I stopped at 12. 12 separate prescription entries. 12 visits to a walk-in clinic in Chatsworth that Diana had never once mentioned to me. 12 prescriptions bearing the name of a doctor whose name had never come up in any conversation about Diana's health in the entire time I had known her to exist on this earth. I looked up Dr. Felix Drummond on my phone. The Route 118 Family Care Clinic had a website that looked like it had been built in 2009 and last updated sometime before that. Dr. Drummond's photograph showed a man in his late 50s with the kind of smile that reminded me of a car salesman who has already decided you are going to leave with something you did not come in wanting. I went back to the insurance file and looked at the dates. 35 years of driving the same corridors means I know my schedule the way a musician knows their own compositions. Not because I memorized it, but because I lived it until it became part of me. I laid the 12 prescription dates against my memory of the past 14 months, one by one. October. I had been running a Las Vegas to Flagstaff circuit. 4 nights away. December. Phoenix delivery. 5 nights. January. Los Angeles to Albuquerque overnight both ways. 6 nights. February. Las Vegas. 3 nights. I kept going. All 12. Every single prescription date cross-referenced against my travel schedule, against the routes I had driven, against the nights I had slept in truck stops and roadside motels, and the cab of my own rig rather than in my own bed. Every single one had been filled on a day I was not in Burbank. Not one exception. Not one overlap. Not one prescription dated on a morning when I had been home for breakfast. I set the phone face down on my knee and stared at the ceiling of the Cedars-Sinai waiting room for 30 seconds. Then I picked it up and looked up the medication name listed on the most recent 6 prescriptions. It was not a name I recognized from any medicine cabinet I had ever opened. Scopolamine-based compound formulation, prescribed by Dr. Felix Drummond, filled at a pharmacy in Reseda. I typed the name into my phone's search browser and read what came back. Scopolamine is used medically in very low doses for motion sickness and pre-surgical sedation. In standard clinical settings, it is administered under careful supervision because of its narrow therapeutic window. At higher concentrations or when administered repeatedly over time, it produces significant short-term memory impairment. A person receiving it would experience sedation followed by disorientation upon waking, with no reliable recollection of what had occurred in the preceding hours. They would not remember what had been done to them or who had been in the room while they were unconscious, or what sounds they might have heard from another part of the house. I turned the phone over and rested it against my thigh. I looked at the wall to my left for a long moment. Then I picked it back up and navigated to the life insurance section of the family account. Carol and I had taken out a policy on Diana when she turned 25. Standard term life, the kind of thing responsible parents do when their child becomes an adult and starts building a life that other people might one day depend on. The coverage amount we had set was $180,000, enough to cover the mortgage on the Clearwater Avenue house with something left over. Practical, careful. Carol's idea, which meant it was the right idea. The coverage amount showing on my screen was not $180,000. It was $620,000. I read it 3 times. Then I pressed my thumb on the policy modification history and watched the entries load one by one. 14 months ago. The same window as the first prescription entry. Someone had contacted the insurance company by phone and then submitted a written request to increase Diana's coverage to $620,000. The request had been signed. The signature on the authorization form was mine. I have signed my name approximately 40,000 times in my life on freight manifests and delivery receipts and business contracts and tax documents and birthday cards and the back of checks and the deed to a house in Burbank, California. I know exactly what my signature looks like. The signature on that authorization form was not mine. I scrolled to the beneficiary field. Holt Family Trust, LLC. I typed that name into the search browser. California Secretary of State Business Registry. Formation date February 14, 2023. 7 months before Travis Holt married my daughter. I put the phone in my jacket pocket. I stood up from the plastic chair. I walked to the window at the far end of the waiting room and stood there with both hands pressed flat against the cold glass and looked out at the Cedars-Sinai parking structure and the dark Los Angeles sky above it, and I breathed the way I breathe when something very large is moving very fast in a direction I did not plan for, and I have a very short amount of time to decide what to do about it. Then I took my hands off the glass, turned around, and walked back to my chair. I had a phone call to make. The first call I made was to Renee Calhoun. Renee is the operations coordinator at Callahan Freight. She has kept my company's dispatch records, personnel files, and route documentation in order for the past 7 years with the organizational precision of someone who has never once misplaced a piece of paper in her professional life and considers the possibility of doing so a personal affront. She is 53 years old, runs the office with the quiet authority of a person who knows exactly where everything is at all times, and has answered my calls at unreasonable hours without complaint on more than one occasion. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep but sharpening fast. "Roy, it is 1:30 in the morning." "I know," I said. "I need the full travel log going back 18 months. Every departure date, every return, every city and state I was operating in. I need it on company letterhead signed by you as operations coordinator and in my email before 6 a.m. A pause. "Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said. "I need the records first." Another pause, shorter this time. Renee has worked with me long enough to know the difference between a situation that requires clarification and one that requires action. "Done," she said. "Check your inbox by 5:50. I ended the call and opened my text messages. I typed a message to Vivian Cross, an attorney I had used 3 years ago for a contract dispute with a carrier who had shorted 3 consecutive deliveries and then disputed the manifest records. Vivian had won that case with documentation so thorough that the opposing counsel had offered her a position at their firm before the ruling came down. She was not the kind of attorney you called for small problems. The message was 4 words. Emergency. Call me. Morning. I sent it and put the phone in my jacket pocket and looked at the gift bag on the seat beside me. The blue pearl earrings in their tissue paper. Diana's birthday. September the 9th. She had turned 34 years old today and spent it unconscious on her own living room floor while her husband watched ESPN and finished a beer. I pressed the knuckles of my right hand against my mouth and held them there for 3 measured seconds. Then I lowered my hand and straightened my jacket and picked up my phone again because there was more to read and I was not finished reading it. That was when the elevator at the end of the hallway chimed. Travis walked into the waiting room at 1:47 in the morning. He had changed his shirt. The one he was wearing now was a clean gray Henley, untucked, the kind of casual that takes some effort to achieve. His hair was neat. He carried a paper cup of coffee in each hand, and he crossed the waiting room with the measured, unhurried pace of a man who had composed himself thoroughly before walking through that door. He held one of the cups out toward me. "Thought you could use this," he said. I looked at the cup, then I looked at his face. "Thank you," I said. I took it. He sat down in the chair to my left, close but not crowding, and wrapped both hands around his own cup. For a moment, he did not say anything, and I watched him from the corner of my eye, the way I watch a load that has shifted slightly and has not yet decided how far it intends to go. "Any update?" he asked. "Still waiting on results," I said. He nodded slowly. He drank from his cup. His hands wrapped around the paper coffee cup were completely, absolutely still. Not a tremor, not a single adjustment of grip. The hands of a man whose nervous system was not in any meaningful sense in distress. "She's going to be okay," Travis said. His voice carried the specific weight of someone holding themselves together for the people around them. "She's stronger than she looks. You know that about her." I made a sound that was not agreement and turned back to my phone. He moved one seat closer. "Roy." His voice dropped into something softer, the careful softness of a person bracing themselves to be vulnerable. "I owe you an apology. Tonight when she went down, I panicked. I should have called 911 the second I found her, and I didn't think clearly, and I am genuinely sorry." He looked at me with his eyes a fraction too bright, the way eyes look when a person is working to keep emotion from tipping over into something visible. "I know how that must have looked to you when you walked in. I know what you must have thought." The apology was immaculate. The timing of it, the self-blame, the slight catch in the voice, every element placed with precision to produce a specific response in the person receiving it. It was the kind of apology that compels the other person to say, "Oh, don't be so hard on yourself. You did everything you could." I did not say that. "You had a hard night," I said. I kept my voice level and my face neutral. Travis nodded, accepting that. He reached across and placed his hand on my forearm, a brief, firm pressure, then withdrew. His fingers were warm, completely dry. The fingers of a man whose body had not been producing stress hormones for the past 2 hours. I went back to my phone. The Holt Family Trust, LLC, had a registered agent listed in the California Secretary of State database. The agent's name was not Travis Holt. It was a name I did not recognize, which told me Travis had been careful about keeping his own name off the surface of it. Underneath the registered agent, the stated business purpose of the LLC was listed as real estate investment and asset management. I navigated back to the insurance file and looked at the beneficiary designation one more time. Holt Family Trust, LLC, $620,000. Signed with a version of my name that I had not written. Travis shifted beside me, recrossing his legs, adjusting his position in the plastic chair, with the ease of a man settling in for a long wait he had anticipated and prepared for. I did not look at him. 35 years behind the wheel teaches you that the most dangerous loads are not the heaviest ones. They are the ones that look balanced until they are not. The ones that give you no warning before they go. I folded my hands in my lap and waited for Dr. Sandra Hale to come back through those double doors. Dr. Sandra Hale came through the double doors at 3:21 in the morning. She walked the length of the waiting room with a tablet in one hand and the particular forward-leaning posture of someone who has made a decision about how the next 10 minutes are going to go and has committed to it fully. A younger physician followed 2 steps behind her, a resident by the look of him present to observe rather than to lead. Travis stood up from his chair the moment he saw her. I stood up too. Dr. Hale's eyes found mine across the room and stayed there. "Mr. Callahan." She stopped in front of me. Not in front of us. In front of me. "The complete panel is back. I need you to come with me, please." She glanced once briefly in Travis's direction. "Right now." Travis took a step forward. "I'm her husband. I should be part of this conversation." Dr. Hale looked at him with the measured, unhurried calm of someone who has had this exact exchange before and knows precisely how it ends. I'll be back with you shortly, Mr. Holt. She turned toward the double doors without waiting for his response. I followed her. The consultation room was small and cold in the particular way of spaces where the temperature is regulated for equipment rather than for the people who sit inside it. Dr. Hale settled across from me with her tablet propped between us, and she did not begin with background or context or the kind of careful softening that doctors sometimes use when they are afraid the truth is too heavy to deliver without padding. She began with the findings. The complete toxicology panel identified 2 compounds in your daughter's system at levels that are clinically significant. She said, holding my eyes with the steady directness of a woman who has learned that looking away does no one any favors. The first is diphenhydramine. That is the active ingredient in common over-the-counter sleep aids, such as Benadryl and Unisom. In a person of Diana's age and body weight, the concentration we measured tonight would represent approximately 3 times the standard sedating dose. At that level, it produces deep, prolonged unconsciousness and significantly depresses the cardiovascular system. I kept my hands flat on my knees. And the second compound, is a scopolamine-based formulation. She set the tablet flat on the table between us. I want to be very direct with you, Mr. Callahan. Scopolamine at this concentration and in this delivery format is not available over the counter. It is not prescribed for standard home use. It is used in clinical settings for sedation, and at lower concentrations administered repeatedly over time, it is known to disrupt the formation of short-term memories. She paused, letting that land where it needed to land. A person receiving it would be sedated and then disoriented upon waking with no reliable recollection of what had occurred in the preceding hours. Whatever was done to them during that window, they would not remember. The room was very quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in a steady, patient rhythm. She wouldn't remember, I said. My voice came out flat and careful. The voice I use when I am working very hard to keep something very large contained in a very small space. Whatever happened while she was under, she would have no memory of it at all. That is correct, Dr. Hale said. The sedation combined with the memory disruption would ensure it. She held my gaze without flinching. Mr. Callahan, the combination of these compounds at these concentrations is not consistent with an accidental overdose. It is not consistent with a medication error. It is consistent with deliberate and repeated administration over an extended period of time. I pressed the knuckles of my right hand against my mouth. I looked at the wall to my left for 3 full seconds. I breathed. Then I looked back at her. Under California law, Dr. Hale continued, her voice dropping by 1 careful degree. I am a mandatory reporter. When a medical professional identifies evidence that strongly suggests a dependent adult is being deliberately harmed, we are required by statute to notify Adult Protective Services immediately. I filed that report 40 minutes ago. She reached across and placed her hand briefly on the edge of the table between us, the closest thing to a human gesture her professional composure would allow in that moment. A caseworker will be reaching out to your family, but I wanted you to hear it from me first, face to face, before anyone else came through that door. I thanked her. The words came out steadier than I had any right to expect them to. She moved Diane to ICU room 318 at 3:40 in the morning. A nurse named Garrett told me I could sit with her beginning at 3:50, that visiting hours in the ICU were restricted, but that given the circumstances, they were making an accommodation. I carried the gift bag in with me, the blue pearl earrings still wrapped in tissue paper. I had not put them down once in the 4 hours since I had walked through Diana's front door. The room was quiet in the way of rooms filled with monitoring equipment. An IV line ran into Diana's left hand. A pulse oximeter clipped her index finger. The overhead lights had been dimmed to a low amber that made the space feel mercifully less like a hospital and more like somewhere a person could rest. I sat in the chair beside the bed and put the gift bag on the small table to her left. Then I folded my hands and waited. Diana's eyes opened at 3:54 in the morning. She looked at the ceiling first. Then she turned her head and looked at me. For 3 seconds, she did not recognize me. Her eyes moved across my face the way a person's eyes move across the face of someone they are trying to place, searching for a reference point, finding none. Her brow pulled together slightly. 3 full seconds of my daughter looking at me like I was a stranger she was trying to remember from somewhere a long time ago. I want to tell you what those 3 seconds felt like. But I have driven through every kind of weather this country produces, and I have never found the words for them. Then something shifted behind her eyes. "Dad." Her voice came out small and rough and very far away, like a signal breaking through static on a long stretch of empty road. "Yeah, sweetheart." My voice broke apart on the second word, and I let it. "It's me. I'm right here." Her face changed all at once. The tears came fast, already running down her cheeks, before she made a sound. And the sound she made was not a full cry. It was something smaller and more devastating than that. A single broken exhale that held 2 years of fear and exhaustion and relief in it all at the same time. I leaned forward and took both her hands in both of mine and held on. I did not try to fill that moment with words. Some moments are larger than language, and the only right thing to do with them is to stay inside them and let them be what they are. Diana fell back into a natural sleep at 4:47 in the morning. Real sleep this time. Even breathing color returning slowly to her face in gradual increments, the monitors holding their numbers in the ranges the nurses had been satisfied with since she arrived. I watched the equipment for 20 minutes after her eyes closed, because watching was something I could do, and doing something, even something as small as reading numbers off a screen, was better than sitting with my hands empty. At 5:10, I stood up, leaned forward, and pressed my lips to Diana's forehead, the way I had done every night when she was small, and I was home long enough to be the one who put her to bed. Her skin was warm. That was the thing I needed to know before I walked out of that room. That her skin was warm. I carried the gift bag out with me. My phone showed one missed call from a number I recognized, received at 4:52 while I was sitting in the chair beside Diana's bed, watching the monitors and making myself stay present. I pressed the name and called back. Colt Warden picked up on the first ring. I want to tell you who Colt Warden is, before I tell you what he said, because he is central to everything that follows, and he deserves a proper introduction. He is 64 years old. He served 2 tours as an Army Ranger and came home with a right knee that never healed correctly and a way of speaking that military service had stripped down to its essential components. No filler, no decoration, only what the structure requires. He moved to Clearwater Avenue 12 years ago as a widower, and we became the kind of friends that do not require maintenance. You can go 2 months without contact and pick up mid-sentence when you do. He has watched my house on every long run I have taken since the day he moved in next door. He drives in bad weather without being asked twice. He does not say things he is not certain of. That last part matters more than anything else I have told you about him. He was already in the Cedars-Sinai parking lot when I came through the automatic doors. Standing beside his truck, a 2007 dark blue Silverado that he had driven since before I could reliably remember, with his arms crossed over his chest and his eyes on the hospital entrance. He had brought 2 gas station coffees. He handed me one without a word of explanation, the way a person hands something to someone who clearly needs it. We sat on the hood of his truck side by side. The sky to the east had turned the color of a bruise in the slow process of healing. The air was cool in the particular way of early September mornings in the San Fernando Valley, that brief window before the heat reasserts itself and reminds you where you are. "Start from the beginning," I said. Colt nodded once. "8 months ago," he said. "That is when I started paying close attention." He spoke the way he always spoke, chronologically and without embellishment. Each fact delivered in the order it occurred, and not a word added to make it more or less than what it was. When I left for long-haul runs, the house on Clearwater Avenue changed in character. Cars he did not recognize appeared on the curb and in the driveway by 9 or 10 in the evening. Music drifted through the walls well past midnight. On nights when the valley air was still enough to carry sound, he could hear laughter and the percussion of glasses from inside his own kitchen. "Every time you were gone for 4 days or more," he said. "Not every single night, but consistently, regularly." "And Diana," I said. Colt adjusted the collar of his jacket. "The light in the upstairs front bedroom. Her room." He kept his gaze level and forward, not at me. "It was always dark by 9:30 at the latest, every time the party was running downstairs." He cleared his throat once. "I stood at my kitchen window more than once and looked at that dark window, Roy. I told myself I did not know what it meant. I was wrong to wait as long as I did." "You could not have known," I said. "I suspected," Colt said. "There is a difference between not knowing and not looking hard enough." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced his phone. He opened a folder and turned the screen toward me. Security camera footage from a post at the property line between his yard and mine, wide-angle, time-stamped in the lower corner. "This man came to the house 6 weeks ago," Colt said. The footage showed a heavy-set man in his late 30s climbing out of a gray sedan parked half a block down. He walked up the driveway and stood with Travis for just over 7 minutes. Travis's body language in the footage required no interpretation. He kept backing up in small increments, both hands raised slightly at hip level, the posture of a man trying to make a problem smaller by making himself smaller. The other man's posture did not change at all. "He came back 3 weeks later," Colt said, swiping to a second clip. "That time Travis let him inside. He was in there for 40 minutes. "Who is he?" I asked. "Took me some time to run the plate," Colt said. "His name is Tommy Reeves. He works for a private debt collection firm out of Las Vegas. The kind of outfit that handles gambling accounts and high-risk personal loans that have gone well past due. The kind of visit where they do not come twice just to talk." He looked at me briefly, then back at the horizon. "I could not find anything under Travis's name in the public debt records. But I know what that kind of visit looks like. I have seen it before, and I know the shape of it." The shape of it was assembling itself in my mind, the way a route assembles itself before you have driven it piece by piece until the road becomes visible. "There is something else," Colt said. He pocketed his phone and turned to face me fully for the first time since we had sat down. His eyes carried the weight of a man who has made a decision he is prepared to stand behind. "About a month ago, the woman Travis had been bringing to the house left for a scheduled appointment and was gone for just under 2 hours. I looked at him. "The woman," I said. "The one who arrives after dark and leaves before morning," Colt said. He held my gaze steadily. "I did not have a name for her yet, but I knew her car, and I knew her schedule." He held my gaze steadily. "While she was gone, I used the spare key you gave me 4 years ago, Roy. The one with standing instructions to check the house whenever something felt wrong." He paused. I decided something felt wrong. Colt kept his eyes on the eastern sky while he told me what he had found inside the house on Clearwater Avenue. "The kitchen," he said. "I checked the cabinets first. Back left corner, lower cabinet, the one with the latch that sticks unless you lift and pull at the same time. He glanced at me. You know the one. I know it, I said. There was a small plastic container in there. No label, no manufacturer markings, no prescription information of any kind. Just a white screw-top container with off-white tablets inside. He reached into his jacket and produced his phone, opened a photograph, and held it toward me. The image showed a plain white container sitting on a kitchen shelf, the kind of container you could buy at any pharmacy for storing vitamins, except that this one had no label, and the tablets inside were an irregular size that did not match any commercial supplement I had ever seen. I photographed it and sent the image to a pharmacist I know in Glendale, Colt said. She told me she could not make a positive identification from a photograph alone, but that the physical characteristics were consistent with a compound tablet, a custom blended formulation, not a commercial product. What did you do with it? I asked. I removed every single tablet from that container, Colt said. Then I replaced them with vitamin C tablets of comparable size and color, and returned the container to exactly the position I had found it. He said it the way he said everything, without emphasis or apology, the flat factual delivery of a man reporting what occurred. Under California law, I was standing in a house I had a key to, with standing instructions from the owner to check the property when something felt wrong. I had reasonable grounds. I acted on them. I understood the legal reasoning he was giving me. More than that, I understood what he had actually done and what it had actually cost him to do it, without calling me first, without asking permission, without knowing whether he was right about any of it. Colt Warden had walked into my daughter's house on a suspicion and made a decision that could not be unmade, and he had carried that decision alone for a month. She started getting better, I said. It was not a question. The pieces were assembling themselves in the particular way pieces assemble when they have been waiting for the right sequence. Within 2 weeks, Colt said, more alert, more herself. She started pushing back when Travis told her things. Small things at first. Which grocery store to use, what time dinner should be. But pushing back. He looked down at his coffee cup. That is when Travis started watching her differently. I could see it from the street. The way he stood when she was near him. The way he positioned himself between her and the front door when they were outside. He knew something had changed, I said. He did not know what, Colt said. But he knew. And when a man like that does not know what changed, he compensates. He paused. He had a secondary supply somewhere other than that cabinet. Had to. When he started using it again, he used more than before, trying to get back to where he had been. And tonight, he overcorrected. Colt set his cup down on the hood of the truck. She fought him, Roy. That is why tonight was different. She was strong enough to fight him, and he had to use everything he had left to put her down, and it was too much. The heat behind my sternum in that moment was something I did not have a name for. It was not anger exactly, though anger was part of it. It was the specific feeling of understanding what your daughter had been doing alone in a dark house while you were sleeping in a truck cab 400 miles away. Fighting. Quietly, without knowing she was fighting, without understanding why her legs were getting stronger or why her mind was coming back to her, but fighting nonetheless. You said Marco contacted you, I said. 3 weeks ago, Colt said. After the third call to this address, he pulled the neighbor registry and cross-referenced it for anyone with emergency response background. My name came up from a community response volunteer program I did with the county back in 2019. He reached into his jacket again. Marco could not go to law enforcement yet. He did not have enough. He needed eyes on the address from someone who knew you and could be trusted not to tip anything off. And you were the eyes, I said, for 3 weeks. He held the phone differently now, not showing me footage but holding it so I could see a voice memo application open on the screen. The file was labeled with a date from 3 weeks ago. Marco recorded this on his personal phone the night of the third call, sitting in the rig before he pulled away. He could not use it in court directly because California requires all parties to consent to being recorded. But he sent it to me because he wanted someone you trusted to have it before any official action was possible. Colt looked at me steadily. You need to hear what Travis said that night, when he thought the paramedics were just doing their paperwork and not paying attention to him anymore. He pressed play. Travis's voice came through the phone speaker with the particular clarity of a recording made in a quiet vehicle interior. He was not speaking to anyone in the room. He was on his phone, his voice low and relaxed, the voice of a man having a private conversation he believed was completely private. It won't be much longer, Travis said. The old man's never home. She won't remember any of it anyway. That's the whole point. A pause, then quieter and warmer in a way that had nothing to do with family. I know. Me too. 2 more weeks, 3 at the outside. Once the paperwork goes through, we're done waiting. The recording ended. I looked at the middle distance between the truck and the hospital entrance. The parking lot surface was wet from overnight condensation, and the rising light caught in it in long, irregular strips. The paperwork, I said. I did not know what that meant 3 weeks ago, Colt said. I think you might know now. I thought about the insurance file on my phone, the modified policy, the beneficiary designation. The LLC formed 7 months before Travis ever introduced himself to my daughter as a man worth trusting. The debt, I said. The amount. Did you find anything on that? Colt reached into his jacket one more time and produced a folded piece of paper. He handed it across. It was a printout from a Nevada state business filing a registered collections firm. Handwritten in the margin in Colt's precise block lettering was a single figure. $74,500. Outstanding balance. Gambling account. Enforcement deadline in approximately 6 weeks from tonight. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket next to the incident report Marco had given me in the kitchen on Clearwater Avenue. 2 pieces of paper. Between them, the shape of everything Travis Holt had been building since before he ever sat across from my daughter and smiled at her like a man who had nothing to hide. I need to make one more call, I said, and then I need to find my daughter. The ICU corridor at 7 in the morning had the particular quality of a place that does not acknowledge the difference between night and day. The same fluorescent lights. The same measured pace of nurses moving between rooms. The same low electronic hum of machines doing the work of keeping people present in the world. Diana was awake when I pushed open the door to room 318. Not fully, not in the bright-eyed way of a person who has slept well and woken rested. Her eyes were open and tracking, which was different from 4 hours ago when they had moved across my face like a searchlight looking for something it could not find. She turned her head when I came in, and this time the recognition was immediate. No delay, no searching. Just her eyes finding mine and holding them with an expression that had exhaustion and relief and something else in it, something careful, like a person who has been carrying a secret so long that they are no longer sure what shape they are without it. You came back, she said. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, I said. I pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. How are you feeling? Like I lost an argument with a freight train. She tried to smile and mostly succeeded. You would know something about that. I would, I said. I did not put my phone on the table. I did not pull out the incident report, or the insurance printout, or the piece of paper with the number $74,500 written in Colt's block lettering. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and I looked at my daughter, and I waited. Because Diana has always talked when she was ready, and not a moment before, and she was ready now. I could see it in the way she was looking at me. She had been carrying something toward this moment for a long time, and she had finally arrived. "Dad," she said, "there are things I need to tell you." "I know," I said. "Take your time." She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at me. 2 years ago, when Travis and I first moved into the house, he was different. Or I thought he was different. I think now that he was exactly who he always was, and I just could not see the shape of it yet. She paused, choosing her words, with the careful deliberateness of someone who has rehearsed this in their head many times and is now discovering that the rehearsed version and the real version feel completely different. He started small, little things, telling me I had said something I did not remember saying, reminding me of appointments I had missed, except I had not missed them, moving things and telling me I had moved them. Her voice stayed level, but her hands on the blanket tightened slowly into loose fists. After a while, I started to believe him. That is the part I have the hardest time explaining, how completely I started to believe him. I kept my hands still and my face quiet. "Go on," I said. "About 14 months ago, he started making me a drink before bed. Warm milk," he said. "Good for sleep." He was very consistent about it. Very attentive. She said the word attentive the way you say a word when you have recently discovered it means the opposite of what you thought. I started sleeping heavily, waking up with gaps in my memory whole afternoons I could not account for. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was getting older. She looked at me directly. I told myself a lot of things, Dad, because the alternative was something I was not ready to look at. "You told yourself what you could manage," I said. "That is not a character flaw. That is survival." Her eyes went bright, and she blinked hard twice. "Those nights you were gone, I would wake up and I could not move my legs, like they were not connected to me anymore. But I could hear everything. Music downstairs, voices, glasses." She pressed her lips together for a moment. "A woman's voice sometimes, laughing at something," he said. Her jaw tightened. I told myself it was a dream. I told myself that for 8 months. The thing that moved through my chest then was not something I will try to put a name to. Some things do not need names. They just need to be felt fully and then set down somewhere that is not in the way of what has to happen next. 6 weeks ago, Diana continued, I started feeling clearer. I do not know why. I started asking questions about the drinks, about where the money was going. Small questions at first. She exhaled slowly. He did not like the questions. What did he do? I kept my voice level. He showed me a document. She swallowed. From 2 years ago. When I first got insurance through his employer's plan, there was a billing error. Something got filed incorrectly, a procedure coded under the wrong category. It was a mistake, a clerical mistake. Her voice dropped. Travis told me that if I kept asking questions, he would report it as intentional fraud. He said the insurance company would pursue it criminally. He said I could lose my nursing license. She looked at me with eyes that had stopped blinking. I believed him, Dad. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. But I believed him because he had been making me doubt everything about myself for 2 years, and I did not have enough of myself left to push back. He created the opening first, I said quietly. Then he used it. Yes. The word came out like something she had been holding underwater and finally let go. Last week, he put a document in front of me. He said it was a healthcare directive. He said the hospital had been asking for it since my last episode and that we needed it on file. He was very calm about it. Very reassuring. She looked at the IV line in her left hand. I signed it without reading it properly. I know I should have read it. But I was tired, Dad. I had been tired for so long. I leaned forward and put both hands over hers on the blanket. Listen to me, I said. Whatever you signed, it can be challenged. In California, any legal document signed under duress or undue influence can be declared void by a court. That means a judge can look at exactly what he did to you over 2 years and rule that your signature on that document does not count. I held her eyes. It does not count, Diana. Do you hear me? She nodded. Then she did something I had not seen her do since she was 11 years old, and Carol had sat her down to explain what the word diagnosis meant. She turned her hands over under mine and held on with both of them, and she cried without trying to stop herself, without managing it or containing it, just cried the way a person cries when they have been holding something alone for longer than any person should have to. I did not tell her it was going to be all right. I did not know yet that it was. What I knew was that I was her father, and I was in that room, and I was not leaving, and sometimes that is the only true thing available, and it is enough. Before I reveal the dark secret, caught on tape comment, Justice, so I know you are still with me. Please note the upcoming parts contain fictionalized elements and might not reflect absolute reality. If you prefer not to listen, you can turn off the video right now. I left Cedars-Sinai at 7:55 in the morning. Diana had fallen back into a light sleep while I was still sitting beside her, her hands loosening their grip on mine gradually, the way tension releases when a person finally allows themselves to stop holding everything together by force. I sat with her for another 10 minutes after her breathing evened out. Then I stood up, picked up the gift bag, and walked out of room 318 without looking back, because looking back was not something I could afford to do right now and still function at the level the next few hours required. The drive from Cedars-Sinai to Vivian Cross's office on Olive Avenue in Burbank took 19 minutes in the early morning traffic. I used 12 of those minutes on the phone with Renee Calhoun, who had sent the travel log to my email at 5:48, 2 minutes ahead of her promised deadline, because Renee Calhoun does not miss deadlines. The document was 18 months of route records, every departure date and return, every city and state formatted on Callahan Freight LLC letterhead and signed in Renee's precise handwriting. I forwarded it to Vivian Cross without commentary. She would know what it meant when she saw it. Vivian Cross's office communicated competence before a single word was spoken inside it. The desk held exactly what it needed to hold. A laptop, a legal pad, a coffee that had been started and set aside, and nothing decorative visible from the client side. 16 years of winning cases in Los Angeles had taught Vivian that the most effective thing an attorney can project across a desk is complete, unhurried control. Her office reflected that principle in every surface. She was standing when I came in, which told me she had heard the outer door and had chosen to be on her feet when I walked through. She was in her late 40s, dark hair pulled back with the focused economy of movement, of someone who does not waste effort on anything that does not advance the objective. She shook my hand once firmly and gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down and start from the beginning," she said. "Don't leave anything out, and don't edit it for me. I'll decide what matters." I talked for 22 minutes without stopping. Vivian listened with both hands flat on the desk and her eyes on my face, not on her notepad. When I finished, she picked up her pen, wrote 4 lines, and looked up. "The toxicology results established deliberate repeated administration of sedating compounds to a dependent adult," she said. "Under California Penal Code Section 368, that is felony elder and dependent adult abuse carrying up to 4 years in state prison on the base charge. Stack the aggravated assault count and the insurance fraud, and you are looking at significantly more." She turned her laptop toward me. But before we get to charges, I want to show you something. On the screen was a California Secretary of State business registration. Holt Family Trust. Oh. LLC. Formation date February 14th, 2023. 7 months before Travis Holt sat across a dinner table from my daughter and smiled at her like a man with nothing to hide. He didn't marry into this plan, Vivian said. He built the plan before he joined the family. She held my eyes for a moment, letting that land. Now, the mirror. I had texted her about the smart mirror during the drive over 3 sentences, explaining what it was and where it was mounted. She had responded with one word. Good. I opened the app on my phone and handed it across the desk. Vivian connected it to her laptop and opened the footage archive on the larger screen. 6 months of recordings arranged in a time-stamped grid. She moved through them with the efficient, selective attention of someone who has been reading documents for evidence for 16 years and knows exactly what she is looking for. She stopped on a clip from 4 months ago. The footage showed the far end of the kitchen counter through the open doorway, captured in the mirror's wide-angle frame. Travis stood at the counter with his back at a partial angle to the camera. In front of him was a glass of warm milk. In his right hand was the white, unlabeled container Colt had described finding in the lower cabinet. And he was pressing tablets from that container against the base of a ceramic mug, grinding them into powder, with the methodical, practiced pressure of someone performing a task they have done so many times, it requires no particular concentration. When the powder was fine enough, he stirred it into the milk. He tilted the glass, examined the surface, added one more small measure from the container. Then he closed it, returned it to the cabinet, and picked up the glass. He was smiling slightly as he turned toward the hallway. Vivian reached out and stopped the footage. She sat back from the screen. That is everything a prosecutor needs in a single clip, she said. Motion method, the substance going into the drink, the deliberateness. She paused. And the smile. She let the footage continue. 3 weeks later in the archive, a different clip. Travis, on the living room sofa phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the lower, flatter register of a man who believes he is completely alone. The mirror's night recording mode rendered the room in pale monochrome. The paperwork is ready, Travis said into the phone. Once she's classified, we move on the house and the accounts. He listened for a moment. Then his voice shifted into something warmer, a tone that did not belong in any conversation about family logistics. I know. 2 more weeks. We're done waiting. Vivian paused the clip. The voice on the other end, she said. Do you recognize it? I had been listening carefully since the moment the recording began. There was something in the rhythm of the response, in the particular cadence of those few compressed words, audible through the phone's microphone, a familiarity I could not yet place precisely. Not yet, I said, but I have heard that voice before. Vivian opened a second application on her laptop. Audio isolation software, she said. It will take approximately 40 minutes to clean and separate the secondary voice from the ambient compression. She began the process, then looked up at me. While that runs, there is something else in the archive I need you to see. Something that changes the timeline of this entire case. She scrolled to a clip from 6 months ago and pressed play. The clip Vivian had scrolled to was dated 3 months ago. The timestamp in the lower corner read 11:41 p.m. on a Tuesday. The living room in night recording mode, everything rendered in the flat, pale monochrome of a camera working in low light. Travis on the sofa, feet tucked beneath him, shoulders loose, phone held close to his ear. The body language of a person who believes they are completely alone and has stopped managing what they project to the room around them. I had seen Travis Holt perform composure for 11 hours straight. I had watched him produce the right expression at the right moment, with the consistency of a man running a program he had written and tested many times. This was something different. This was Travis with the program turned off. And the difference between those two versions of the same person was the most frightening thing I had seen since I walked through Diana's front door and found her on the floor. "She's getting harder to manage," Travis said into the phone. His voice was low and unhurried, the voice of a man sharing a private assessment with someone he trusted completely. "The levels aren't holding the way they were. I'm going to need to adjust." A pause. He listened. Then he laughed, a short, quiet sound, with nothing warm in it. "No, she won't remember. She never remembers. That's the whole architecture of it." Vivian paused the clip and looked at me across the desk. "The architecture of it," she said. "That is not the language of a man who improvised. That is the language of a man who designed something." "Keep going," I said. She pressed play. "The old man's schedule is locked in through the end of the month," Travis continued. "He won't be back until the 15th at the earliest." Another pause, longer this time. Then his voice shifted by a register, dropping into something private and warm and entirely separate from anything I had ever heard come out of him in 2 years of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings and the ordinary proximity of family. "I know," he said. "Me too. Soon." The call ended. Travis sat motionless for a moment with the phone against his chest, looking at the ceiling, with the closest thing to an unguarded expression I had ever seen cross his face. Vivian stopped the footage. The audio isolation program chimed softly on the other side of the laptop. Vivian turned the screen toward me. The software had separated the secondary voice from the ambient compression of the phone recording and cleaned it to a usable frequency. She pressed play on the isolated track. A woman's voice. 4 words clear enough now to carry their full weight across a desk in a law office on a Tuesday morning. 4 words spoken in the particular register of someone sharing a private moment with a person they know well enough to drop all performance around. I know that voice. It landed in my chest the way recognition always lands. Not as a thought, but as a physical event, a shift in weight, a sudden reorientation of everything I thought I understood about the geography of the past 2 years. "Her name is Renata Cruz," Vivian said. She had already pulled up a LinkedIn profile on a separate browser tab. The photograph showed a woman in her mid-30s, dark hair. Professional headshot, the kind of photograph that projects exactly the right amount of approachability for a client-facing role. She is the transaction coordinator at Pacific Coast Realty Group in Sherman Oaks. Her primary responsibility for the past 8 months has been processing the documentation for the sale and title transfer of residential properties in the West San Fernando Valley. Vivian held my eyes. "Including, as of 6 weeks ago, the property at 4471 Clearwater Avenue, Burbank, California." The room was very quiet for a moment. "She has been processing the paperwork to transfer my daughter's house," I said. "Your house," Vivian said. "The property is in your name, Roy. You purchased it in 1991. Diana lives there under a family arrangement, not a title transfer, which means the conservatorship authorization document Diana signed last week was the mechanism by which Travis intended to establish legal control over your assets, not just Diana's." She let that land. "He was not just going after Diana's insurance policy, he was going after everything you own." I pressed both palms flat on the desk and looked at the surface of it and breathed once slowly all the way in and all the way out. "The Venmo records," Vivian said, moving forward with the particular efficiency of a person who knows that giving a client too long to sit with one piece of information before delivering the next is not kindness, but delay. 23 transfers to an account registered to Felix Drummond over the past 14 months. Each transfer under $500. She turned the laptop back toward herself and typed, "Structuring payments below the $500 reporting threshold to avoid financial scrutiny is a violation of federal law under 31 U.S.C. Section 5324 independent of any state charges. That brings federal prosecutors into this case alongside the California DA and Renata Cruz," I said. "What does this make her?" "A co-conspirator at minimum," Vivian said. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and dependent adult financial abuse. If the title transfer documentation she processed contains forged signatures which, based on the insurance authorization precedent, I believe it does, she is looking at felony forgery charges under California Penal Code Section 470. She picked up her pen. "I want to pull the Ring camera footage from your neighbor across the street before we go to APS. Colt mentioned a woman arriving at the house after dark on multiple occasions. If that footage shows Renata Cruz entering the property during periods when Diana was sedated, we have physical corroboration of the conspiracy timeline." She picked up her desk phone and dialed. "This is Vivian Cross. I need to speak with James Okafor in Adult Protective Services. Tell him I have a dependent adult abuse case with 18 months of documented evidence, federal exposure, and 2 subjects. Tell him I need to bring this to his office today." She listened for a moment, then said, "This afternoon. I'm sending the file ahead." She set the phone down and looked at me across 52 pages of assembled evidence. "In 16 years of practice," she said, "I have never walked into a filing with this level of completeness." She picked up her pen one more time. "But before we go to Okafor, there is one more thing I need to ask you about." She looked at me steadily. "The party," she said. "Travis has been planning a celebration this Saturday evening at the house on Clearwater Avenue." I looked at her. Outside the window behind her desk, the morning sun was climbing above the Burbank roofline, the kind of clean September light that made everything look more straightforward than it was. "I know about the party," I said. Vivian waited. "What if we let him have it?" I said, and we gave him an audience he did not plan for. The Adult Protective Services Office for Los Angeles County was on South Vermont Avenue, a 20-minute drive from Vivian's office in Burbank, through mid-morning traffic that moved the way LA traffic always moves, in long, deliberate surges punctuated by inexplicable stillness. Vivian drove. I sat in the passenger seat with the gift bag on my lap and watched the city pass outside the window and tried to organize the past 8 hours into something I could carry without it collapsing under its own weight. James Okafor met us at the front reception himself. I want to tell you who James Okafor is because he matters to what happened next, and he deserves more than a passing description. He is 51 years old, 17 years in Adult Protective Services for LA County. A man who has spent nearly 2 decades hearing the worst things that families do to the people they are supposed to protect, and has learned to function inside that knowledge without being consumed by it. He is broad across the shoulders with close-cropped gray hair and the particular quality of stillness that comes from having sat across from a great deal of human suffering and understood that his job in those moments is to be the steadiest thing in the room. He shook my hand once and walked us directly back to his office without stopping at the reception desk, which told me Vivian's file had arrived, with enough weight to warrant that particular courtesy. "Miss Cross's documentation came through at 11 this morning," he said, settling across from us with the file open on his laptop. "I have reviewed the preliminary material. I need you to walk me through the sequence in your own words before we move forward." I talked for 18 minutes. James Okafor took notes without interrupting once. When I finished, he set his pen down and looked at the file on his screen for a long moment before he spoke. "In 17 years, he said, I have managed cases of opportunistic financial abuse, cases of deliberate neglect, and cases of sustained physical harm. What I am looking at right now is all 3 categories operating simultaneously, premeditated, and executed across 14 months. He picked up his pen again. I am filing an emergency protective order petition with Judge Patricia Wren this afternoon. Judge Wren handles dependent adult protection orders for this county, and with this level of documented evidence, I expect her to sign before end of business today. Under California Welfare and Institutions Code Section 15,657.03, an emergency protective order for a dependent adult can be issued by a judge on the same day. The petition is filed when the evidence establishes immediate risk of harm. The order would prohibit Travis from contacting Diana and from entering the property on Clearwater Avenue. It would also freeze his access to any joint financial accounts pending investigation. I have also been in contact with the FBI field office in Westwood since this morning, James continued. Given the federal fraud exposure, the insurance forgery, the Venmo, structuring the interstate elements of the scheme, the Bureau will be working alongside the county DA. They move quickly when the evidence is this complete. He looked at me directly across the desk. Mr. Callahan, do you happen to know where Travis will be this Saturday evening? I looked at him. He has been planning a party, I said, at the house on Clearwater Avenue, to celebrate a promotion at work. He has been organizing it for 3 weeks. James nodded slowly. Then we will coordinate accordingly. He wrote something on his notepad and did not look up. Is there anything else I should know before I make these calls? One more name, I said. Pete Garza, officer with the Burbank Police Department. I will be reaching out to him directly. He will be at the house Saturday evening in a supporting capacity. James looked up. You know Officer Garza personally. Last February, I said. I was running the I-10 east of Pomona in a freezing rain. A passenger vehicle had lost control on the overpass and gone through the guardrail. The driver was trapped. I stopped and held the car stable with my rigs until emergency services arrived. The driver was Pete Garza's wife. I paused. He told me afterward that if I ever needed anything, I should call him. I have never called in a favor in my life. I am calling this one. James held my gaze for a moment. Then he wrote Pete Garza's name on his notepad and underlined it once. We left the APS office at 1:15 in the afternoon. Vivian drove me back to Cedars-Sinai, and I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes after she dropped me off, doing what I always do after a delivery has been completed, and I am not yet ready to move. I sat still and let everything find its actual weight. Then I made 4 calls. The first was to Renee Calhoun, asking her to hold my schedule clear through the following week. She said without asking any questions that she would handle it. The second was to Colt Warden. Saturday evening, I said. The house, I need you there by 5. Bring the camera equipment. A pause, then already planned on it, he said. I'll be there at 4:30. The third was to Dolores Webb, my neighbor across the street, 74 years old, who had been watching the house on Clearwater Avenue with the quiet, faithful attention of a woman who has lived on the same block for 31 years and notices everything that moves on it. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her I would like her to come to a small gathering on Saturday evening, she said, Roy Callahan, I have been waiting for you to ask me something for 8 months. Her voice carried the particular satisfaction of a person who has been holding information and has finally been given permission to use it. The fourth call was the one I had been thinking about since the APS office. Travis answered on the third ring. His voice was warm and concerned, the voice he kept ready for conversations with me. Roy, how is she? I've been worried sick. She's going to be okay, I said. I kept my voice tired and relieved in equal measure, the voice of a father who has been through a long night and come out the other side of it. Listen, Travis, I've been doing some thinking. I know I came in hard last night. I know you were trying to handle things, and I made it harder. I'd like to make that right." I paused. "You've been planning that party for weeks. I don't want what happened to ruin that for you. Why don't we go ahead with it Saturday? I'll be there. I think it would do everyone some good." A silence that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Long enough for Travis to run the calculation. Long enough for him to decide that appearing at that party surrounded by neighbors and acquaintances, looking like a devoted son-in-law and a man with nothing to hide was exactly what he needed right now. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, Roy, I think that's a good idea. Thank you." "I'll see you Saturday," I said. I ended the call and sat in the parking lot and looked at the phone in my hand for a long moment. Then I got out of the car and walked back through the automatic doors of Cedars Sinai because my daughter was upstairs, and the next thing on the list was the only thing on the list that had nothing to do with strategy or evidence or the careful assembly of consequence. It was just her father coming back to sit beside her bed. Thursday passed in a hospital chair. I slept there with my jacket folded over my shoulders. Woke at 5 when the shift changed, ate something from the vending machine at the end of the hall that I could not have identified by taste alone, and was back in the chair beside Diana's bed before 6. The monitors held their numbers in the ranges the nurses had been satisfied with since Wednesday night. Color was returning to Diana's face in gradual increments, the way color returns to something that has been kept from light for too long and is only now being allowed to remember what it looked like before. She asked about Travis on Thursday morning. Not with concern, not with the voice of a woman who missed her husband. She asked the way a person asks about the location of something they are not sure they want to find, her eyes careful and her hands still on the blanket. "He's been notified about the protective order," I said. "Under California Welfare and Institutions Code Section 15,657.03. The emergency protective order Judge Patricia Wren had signed Wednesday afternoon prohibited Travis from contacting Diana directly from entering the property on Clearwater Avenue and from accessing any joint financial accounts pending the ongoing investigation. The order had been served to Travis by a sheriff's deputy at 6:47 Wednesday evening, while I was sitting in this same chair watching Diana sleep. "He cannot come here," I said. "He cannot contact you. You are safe." Diana looked at the window. The morning sky outside was the particular flat blue of a September day in the San Fernando Valley that has not yet decided what it intends to become. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Before last night. How long did you know something was wrong?" I pulled in one slow breath. "I had a half-second in March," I said, "when I came home early from a Phoenix run and found you at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. You looked up and it took a moment for your eyes to find me. A moment too long." I looked at my hands. A woman came through 20 minutes later with an explanation that was entirely reasonable, and I chose to believe it because the alternative required me to look at something I was not ready to look at. Diana's jaw tightened. "Renata," she said. "Her name is Renata. I did not know who she was until you just told me. But I heard her voice. Downstairs on those nights. I knew there was a woman." She looked at me with eyes that had finished crying and moved into something steadier and colder on the other side of it. I told myself I was imagining it. "You were not imagining any of it," I said. She nodded once, accepting that the way you accept something you already knew but needed to hear, said aloud by another person, before it became fully real. Then she looked at the gift bag on the table beside her bed, where it had sat since Wednesday night, and said, "Can I see them?" I handed her the bag. She reached inside and unwrapped the tissue paper and held the blue pearl earrings up in the morning light coming through the window, turning them slowly, watching the light move through them. You went back for them, she said. Week after you pointed at them, I said. She closed her fingers around them and held them against her chest and did not say anything for a long moment, and I did not require her to. Vivian Cross called Thursday afternoon at 2:47. Judge Wren's order was in effect. The FBI field office in Westwood had assigned 2 agents to the insurance fraud component of the case. Dr. Felix Drummond had received formal notification from the California Medical Board that his license was under review pending investigation. The Venmo transfer records had been subpoenaed, and the title transfer documentation Renata Cruz had been processing for the Clearwater Avenue property had been frozen by court order, meaning the paperwork Travis had been waiting on could not be completed or filed. Everything is in motion, Vivian said. Saturday evening, we will be ready. I thanked her and went back to the chair beside Diana's bed. Friday was quieter. Diana slept more than she was awake, which the nurses said was normal and healthy, and exactly what her body needed to do. I read. I walked the corridor twice an hour. I ate a sandwich from the cafeteria on the ground floor that was better than I expected it to be, which was not saying much. Pete Garza called Friday afternoon, and we talked for 12 minutes. Pete is 44 years old, 14 years on the Burbank Police Department, the kind of officer who does the job because he believes in what the job is supposed to be, rather than what it sometimes becomes. He is built like a man who spent his 20s doing things that required being built that way, and he has a directness in conversation that I have always respected. His wife Carol was the woman I had held in her car on the I-10 overpass in February, one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on her arm, talking to her about nothing and everything for 22 minutes until the fire department arrived with the equipment to open the door. I'll be there at 6 soon, Pete said. Civilian clothes, warrant in my jacket. You give me the word and I will handle the rest. There may be a second subject, I said. A woman named Renata Cruz. James Okafor at APS will have the details. Already talked to Okafor this morning, Pete said. We're coordinated. A pause. Roy, you doing all right? I will be, I said. Saturday night I will be. Friday ended, the way days end in hospital rooms, not with a clock or a decision, but with the lights in the corridor dimming slightly, and the pace of footsteps outside the door slowing to the particular rhythm of a building settling into night. Diana woke at 9:30 and asked me what I was thinking about. The road, I said. She looked at me with the expression she had been using on me since she was 7 years old. The one that meant she knew I was not telling her everything and had decided to allow it. Is it almost over, Dad? I looked at my daughter in the amber light of that hospital room color, back in her face the blue pearl earrings on the table beside her, the monitors steady and sure. One more day, Watts, I said. Then it's over. She settled back into her pillow and closed her eyes, and I sat with the particular quality of a Thursday night becoming a Friday, becoming a Saturday. And I let the hours move through me, the way miles move under a truck on a long, dark stretch of highway, one at a time without rushing, because the destination was already decided, and the only thing left to do was drive. I drove home to Clearwater Avenue on Saturday morning for the first time since Wednesday night. The house looked identical from the outside. Same dark green shutters Diana had chosen when we repainted in 2021. Same painted mailbox she had done by hand, because the standard issue one did not suit her, the same way it had not suited her mother before her. The front light was off. A newspaper from Thursday sat on the porch step, still in its plastic sleeve, which told me everything I needed to know about the quality of Travis's performance as a concerned husband over the past 3 days. I unlocked the door and went in. There is a real and specific difference between a house that someone has been living in and a house that has been suddenly emptied of its weight. I have come home to this house after long haul runs more times than I can count, and it has never felt the way it felt on that Saturday morning. The air was different. Not stale exactly, but arranged differently. Furniture repositioned by increments. Small objects in places they had not been in 1991 when Carol and I moved our first box through that door. A coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter. Lip print on the rim. Not Diana's shade. I removed it, washed it, and put it away. Then I walked through every room the way I walk through a facility I am inspecting for the first time, methodically, without sentiment, noting what had changed and what had been there before the changes. The living room furniture angled differently from how Diana had always arranged it. A framed photograph on the bookshelf that I did not recognize two people at a restaurant. Neither of them my daughter. I took it down and placed it face down on the shelf. Then I went to the garage and backed my truck up to the side gate. Colt arrived at 4:30 exactly as promised, driving the dark blue Silverado with a flatbed trailer attached, carrying his outdoor speaker system and a folding table he had owned since before I knew him. He backed it in without being asked, unhitched the trailer, and came to find me in the kitchen where I was making coffee. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Ask me Sunday," I said. He accepted that and poured himself a cup, and we stood at the kitchen counter and went through the sequence one more time, not because either of us had forgotten it, but because going through a sequence before a critical delivery is not a sign of uncertainty. It is a sign of professionalism. At 5 o'clock, I carried the 65-inch television from the garage and positioned it on the patio facing the backyard. The extension cord ran along the fence line under a strip of outdoor carpet. The HDMI cable connected to a tablet Vivian had loaded with the 3 mirror clips cued to the grinding footage full screen, ready to play at the press of one button. I tested it twice. Both times it came up clean and immediate, and large enough to be seen clearly from every corner of the yard. I covered the television with a moving blanket and left it against the fence where it looked like stored equipment rather than what it was. Dolores Webb arrived at 5:15 dressed as though she was attending a church social, which from Dolores Webb was not an affectation but a standard. She was 74 years old and had lived across the street from this house since 1993, and she crossed the yard with the purposeful step of a woman who had been waiting 8 months for permission to be useful. "So, I brought potato salad," she said. She handed me the bowl and then looked me in the eye. "And I brought my signed statement for Miss Cross. Notarized this morning." "Thank you, Dolores," I said. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just make sure it counts." The first neighbors arrived at 5:30, then more. By 6 o'clock, the backyard held 22 people, a collection of faces from Clearwater Avenue and the surrounding blocks who had come because Roy Callahan had called and asked them to come, and Roy Callahan did not call and ask for things without a reason. Nobody had been told the real reason. They did not need to be. The food was real, the evening was warm, and the company was genuine, and if there was a quality of collective held breath underneath all of it, only 4 people in that yard knew why. Pete Garza arrived at 6:10 in a gray polo shirt and dark jeans, his badge and his warrant sealed in the inside pocket of the jacket he carried folded over one arm. He found me near the grill, shook my hand without excess, and positioned himself near the side gate with a line of sight to both the backyard entrance and the driveway. James Okafor stood near the back fence in a linen shirt, talking to a neighbor about parking on residential streets, looking for all the world, like a man who had come for the food. Vivian Cross sat in a patio chair near the television, with a glass of sparkling water, and her phone face down on the armrest, which was the most relaxed I had ever seen her look, and the least relaxed she had ever actually been. Travis Holt arrived at 6:23. He came through the side gate with Renata Cruz at his left shoulder, and the moment I saw the two of them together in the flesh, for the first time something cold and clear moved through my chest. Renata Cruz was exactly what the LinkedIn photograph had suggested, polished and composed, and wearing the careful expression of a woman who has decided how this evening is going to go, and is simply waiting for everyone else to arrive at the same conclusion. Travis scanned the yard in a single practiced sweep. His eyes found mine and he crossed to me, immediately. Arms open, the performance already running at full capacity. "Roy." He gripped my shoulder with both hands. "This means a lot. Seriously. After everything this week, this means a lot." "Glad you came," I said. I meant it. I meant it completely. He moved into the party with the ease of a man who has spent 2 years learning the texture of this family's social world and knows exactly how to move inside it. He shook hands. He laughed at the right moments. He accepted a beer from Colt Warden without appearing to notice the particular quality of stillness with which Colt handed it to him. I watched him from across the yard, and I thought about 35 years of reading loads, about the ones that looked balanced until they shifted, about the difference between a load that was secure and a load that was performing security. I looked at my watch. 6:41. I picked up my own drink and walked to the center of the yard. I tapped my glass twice with a spoon, the way people do at gatherings when they want the room to settle, and the yard went quiet. The way yards go quiet when everyone present understands, on some level, that something is about to be said that is worth hearing. 22 faces turned toward me. Some of them neighbors I had known for 30 years. Some of them people I recognized by sight, but not by name. All of them present because I had asked them to be, and all of them about to understand why. I kept it short. "I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight," I said. "Most of you know it has been a hard week for this family. Diana is doing better, and she sends her love to this neighborhood that she has been part of her whole life." I paused. "I also want to say something to Travis. 2 years ago you came into this family, and you told me you were going to take care of my daughter. I believed you." I looked across the yard at him directly. "I think it is only right that you get a chance to say something tonight, in front of the people who matter." Travis did not hesitate. He never hesitated. It was one of the things about him I had spent 2 years mistaking for confidence, and had only recently understood was something else entirely. He stepped forward, raised his beer, and smiled the smile of a man who has been handed a microphone and knows exactly what to do with it. "Family first," he said. "That is what this house has always stood for. That is what Diana has always stood for. And I want everyone here to know that no matter what this week threw at us, that does not change." He looked around the yard with the easy warmth of a man who believes the room belongs to him, to Diana, to this family, and to Roy who built all of it. He raised the beer toward me. I nodded at Colt. Colt pulled the moving blanket off the television and pressed the button on the tablet. The 65-inch screen came alive in the early evening light, bright enough to be clearly visible from every corner of the yard, large enough that no one present had any difficulty seeing exactly what was on it. Travis at the kitchen counter. The unlabeled white container in his right hand. The methodical, practiced motion of grinding tablets into powder against the base of a ceramic mug. The careful stirring. The examination of the surface. The addition of one more measure. The return of the container to the cabinet. And then the turn toward the hallway and the smile. The yard went so quiet that I could hear the sprinklers running 2 houses down. Travis's beer can dropped 3 inches in his hand before he caught it. His face did what the faces of very controlled people do when confronted with something they prepared contingency plans for but did not actually expect to encounter. It went completely still for 2 full seconds, the program running its diagnostics, searching for the response that would work here, in this yard, in front of these people, with this particular image playing on a screen behind his own words about family. There was no response that would work. I think he understood that in those 2 seconds. I think he understood it completely. He turned toward the side gate. Tom, Travis Holt. Pete Garza's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried the specific authority of a man who has said those 2 words in that particular tone enough times to know that the tone does the work. Pete had moved from the side gate to the center of the yard exit, with the quiet efficiency of a man who had positioned himself for exactly this movement 30 minutes ago and was now simply executing it. His jacket was open. His badge was visible. His right hand rested at his side. I need you to stop where you are and place your hands where I can see them. Travis stopped. For 3 seconds, he stood with his back to the yard, shoulders tight, the beer can still in his right hand, and I watched him make the calculation one final time. The gate behind Pete Garza, the fence on the left, 22 people between him and every other exit. James Okafor moving quietly from the back fence toward Renata Cruz, who had not moved from the spot where she had been standing since the television came on, and whose face had gone the color of old concrete. Travis turned around. He looked at the television screen still playing the image looping back to the beginning. He looked at Pete Garza. He looked at James Okafor. He looked at Vivian Cross, who had risen from her patio chair and was standing with her phone raised recording. Then he looked at me. I looked back at him across the yard, across the folding tables, with their food and their drinks, and the ordinary equipment of an ordinary Saturday evening, and I held his gaze for as long as he wanted to hold it. I did not look away. I did not need to. There was nothing in my chest that required me to look away from Travis Holt. "Please extend your hands forward," Pete said. Travis extended his hands. The handcuffs made a sound that was small and specific, and carried in the quiet evening air, with a clarity that I believe every person in that yard will remember for a long time. The sound of a mechanism completing the function it was designed for. Not dramatic, not violent, just final. Across the yard, James Okafor placed his hand on Renata Cruz's arm and spoke to her in a low, professional voice. She did not resist. She stood very straight, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere above the roofline of the house, and she allowed James to guide her toward the gate, with the particular stiffness of a person who is using every remaining unit of composure to prevent themselves from coming apart in public. Dolores Webb stood at the far edge of the yard, with her arms folded across her chest. She watched Pete Garza walk Travis toward the front of the house. She watched James Okafor follow with Renata Cruz. And then she turned her head and looked at me across the yard, and she gave one slow, deliberate nod. I nodded back. The neighbors were very quiet. Not the quiet of shock, exactly. The quiet of people who have watched something reach its conclusion and are still in the process of understanding what they witnessed. Someone set a drink down on a folding table. Someone else said something in a low voice to the person beside them. The sprinklers, 2 houses down, continued their business without interruption. Colt reached over and turned off the television. The yard held the last of the September evening light, warm and flat, and entirely indifferent to what had just happened inside it, the way light always is, the way the road always is, continuing without comment past whatever occurs along its length. I set my own drink down on the nearest table. My hands were not shaking. I want to be clear about that. After everything, after 36 hours without sleep and 140 miles of road and 8 hours of evidence and 3 days in a hospital chair, my hands were not shaking. They were the steadiest they had been all week. The neighbors left quietly, not all at once the way people leave when a party ends badly, but in ones and twos, each of them pausing to say something to me on their way out through the side gate. Some of them squeezed my arm. Some of them said Diana's name. Dolores Webb was the last to go, and she stopped in front of me and held both my hands in both of hers for a long moment, without saying anything, which from Dolores Webb was its own kind of eloquence. Then she crossed the street to her own house, and the porch light came on behind her door, and Clearwater Avenue went quiet in the particular way it goes quiet on a Saturday evening, when the ordinary business of the neighborhood has resumed around something that was anything but ordinary. Colt and I sat on the back porch until 10 o'clock. We did not talk much. We did not need to. The folding tables were still up, the food mostly untouched after everything, the September evening cooling slowly around us, the way September evenings in the valley do, the temperature dropping by degrees so gradual you do not notice until you realize you have been comfortable for an hour without knowing why. At some point, Colt went inside and came back with 2 glasses of water and set one in front of me without comment. I drank it. He drank his. We sat with the quiet of 2 men who have been through something together and have not yet found the words for it, which is its own kind of comfort. "You did right by her," Colt said finally. He was looking at the yard, not at me. "I should have looked sooner," I said. "Yes," he said. He did not argue with that. It was one of the things I valued most about Colt Warden. He did not argue with true things in order to make you feel better. "But you looked," he said. "That counts." I thought about that for a while. Then I went inside and washed the dishes because the dishes needed washing, and it was something I could do with my hands, while everything else settled into its actual shape. Vivian Cross called Sunday morning at 8:15. Both arraignments had been completed Saturday night. Travis had entered a not guilty plea across all charges, which Vivian said was expected and irrelevant given the weight of the evidence file. Renata Cruz had entered not guilty as well, but her attorney had already contacted the DA's office to begin preliminary discussion of cooperation terms. Dr. Felix Drummond had accepted a formal agreement with the California Medical Board on Saturday evening, surrendering his license permanently and agreeing to full cooperation with both the state and federal investigations. His testimony, Vivian said, would confirm that Travis had approached him 14 months ago with a structured financial offer in exchange for the compound prescriptions and the conservatorship certification documentation. Drummond had known exactly what the compounds were for. He had provided them for money. He would say so under oath. The Holt Family Trust, LLC, had been dissolved by court order. The title transfer documentation Renata Cruz had been processing was voided. The property at 4471 Clearwater Avenue, Burbank, California, was confirmed clear in my name exactly as it had been since 1991. The forged insurance authorization had been flagged by the carrier, and the policy modification reversed. Diana's coverage was restored to its original amount. The conservatorship authorization document Diana had signed under duress was declared void by Judge Wren on Monday morning under California Probate Code, Section 1575, which addresses undue influence in the execution of legal documents. The judge had reviewed the evidence of Travis's systematic psychological manipulation of Diana over 14 months and ruled that no document signed under those conditions could be considered a valid expression of Diana's intent. Diana was discharged from Cedars-Sinai on Tuesday, October the 1st. Dr. Sandra Hale confirmed her levels were fully clear and her vitals completely stable. The nurse who had managed her care for most of her stay hugged her at the door. Diana told her the hospital pillows needed significant improvement, but that the nursing had been genuinely excellent. I drove her home along Clearwater Avenue in the early October morning light. She walked through the house slowly, the careful way of someone reacquainting themselves with a space they have been away from, touching things lightly as she passed them, checking that they were still where they belonged. She stopped in the living room and looked at the wall where the mirror had hung. The bracket was still there. 2 small screws in the drywall. The faint rectangle of slightly less faded paint showing the outline of where it had been. Diana looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned to me. "I want to paint this room," she said. "Tell me the color," I said. She made herself a cup of tea from the cabinet she had always kept it in and sat down at the kitchen table, and I sat across from her, and we stayed there for a long time, in the ordinary light of an October morning, drinking tea and not needing to fill the space with anything other than what it already held. Travis Holt entered a guilty plea on November the 14th. The charges included felony-dependent adult abuse under California Penal Code, Section 368, aggravated assault insurance fraud, forgery of a legal document, and conspiracy. The federal counts pursued by the FBI field office in Westwood added wire fraud and structured financial transactions under federal statute. The sentencing exposure, Vivian told me, was significant. The kind of number that does not leave room for minimization. Renata Cruz entered a guilty plea on November 18th, cooperating fully in exchange for a reduced charge. Dr. Drummond's testimony had been delivered in full and entered into the record. Pete Garza called the evening of Travis's plea. He did not say much. He said, "It held," which I understood to mean the warrant, the evidence, the whole careful structure of it. And I told him I appreciated everything he had done, and he said Carol was doing well, and sent her thanks, and we said good night, and ended the call the way men end calls when everything that needed to be said has been said. Colt came over for dinner the following Saturday. Diana cooked, which told me more about her recovery than any medical report could have. She made her mother's chili recipe, the one Carol had written on an index card in 1988, that was still taped inside the cabinet door above the stove, and we ate at the kitchen table with the October wind moving through the yard outside and the porch light on and the house smelling the way it was supposed to smell. After dinner, Diana went upstairs. Colt and I sat at the table with our coffee and the comfortable quiet of people who have said what needed saying and are now simply present together in a room they are glad to be in. "She's going to be all right," Colt said. I looked at my coffee cup. I thought about Diana painting the living room. I thought about the index card above the stove in Carol's handwriting. I thought about 35 years of roads and the particular quality of homecoming that only exists because of everything that comes before it. "Yes," I said, "she is." I drove out of Burbank on a Tuesday morning in November with no freight in the trailer and no delivery on the manifest and nowhere particular to be. Just the road. The I-5 northbound opened up past the Tejon Pass, the way it always does. The valley falling away behind me and the sky ahead going wide and clean and blue in the particular way of California November mornings that have no interest in being anything other than exactly what they are. I set the cruise control and put both hands easy on the wheel and let the miles come. I have been driving this road for 35 years. I know every grade, every wind gap, every stretch where the asphalt goes smooth for a quarter mile before the old patches come back. I know this road the way I know my daughter's voice, by feel, by memory, by the accumulated weight of every time I have traveled it before. I thought about Diana at the kitchen table that morning, both hands around her coffee cup. The October light on her face looking out the window at the yard with the expression of a woman who is relearning what ordinary feels like and finding that it fits. I thought about what I had learned. Loving someone is not the same as protecting them. Trusting someone is not the same as watching over them. I had spent 35 years learning to read every warning sign the road could produce, and I had walked past the ones that mattered most because they were inside my own front door and I had decided without ever saying so out loud that home was the one place I did not need to pay attention. I was wrong about that. I know better now. I looked in the rearview mirror. Burbank was a small, bright shape behind me catching the morning light. I pressed the accelerator and drove toward it. This is my family story. Not a proud one in every chapter, but an honest one. I am a father who drove 1,000,000 miles and missed the most important signs inside his own front door. These grandpa stories do not get told enough, the ones where the danger wore a familiar face and sat at your dinner table every Sunday. I believed that love was enough. I believed that trust meant looking away. God showed me otherwise in the hardest way a father can be shown. So let me say plainly what took me too long to understand. Do not be like me. Ask the hard questions of the people you love. Check on them. Not because you doubt them, but because real love means staying awake. My personal opinion, silence inside a family is never neutral. It is always protecting something. The only question is whether that something deserves protection. These grandpa stories, these family story moments, they happen in ordinary houses to people who believed everything was fine. If this family story stayed with you, drop a word in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd be grateful if you stayed for what comes next. Thank you for walking this road with me all the way to the end. A note. Before we continue, the stories ahead include fictional elements shaped for reflection and education. If that is not what you are looking for, no pressure at all. Step away and find what serves you better.